First item is approval of the June 12th public hearing minutes. Any comments on those extensive minutes?
I move to approve them as submitted.
All right.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
And then the June 12th regular meeting minutes, I did have one correction.
Oh,
In the members, got
Oh, what did I do?
Mr. Chavon still on there without.
Oh, got it. Okay.
She probably just did an actual reading.
I know, I actually did read it.
oh, yeah.
Okay.
Besides that, does anybody else have any other comments?
No. I motion approve.
I approve as amended.
As amended. I motion approve as amended.
And I'll second.
Okay.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. First item up is the rack. You guys know the deal. Go for it. Wow. I've been here before, you guys.
Greg and I will sit in different seats.
Yeah, change it up.
Actually, I don't even need to sit. We can. So we got the letter, the response. We had submitted this one here. Got the letters from Brian and Pam back to us, and wanted to respond to their comments and concerns about that. And basically, we've come up with option A, B, and C. A is probably a closer 100% word-for-word type of a reaction to the comments that were received. And B and C are closer to what the owner would like to do in terms of a response. So we figured we got to get this thing moving and submit it for building permits. We bring you all the options and discuss them. And I think they all have good merits, but we're leaning towards this one because it's got a little bit of a rhythm. It's a little, part of this problem, which is the one that responds exactly to the comments that were received, is we're still spanning this bay. And if you look at the steel, whenever we span the bay, we've got to start reinforcing the steel on each side. And this is why we were coming back to revisit this, was to lower the parapets. And now this is raising them up on either side of the steel. And then this also, by centering it, which, we would have thought of doing that, but it's now spanning the bay again. So your steel's spanning this much more that we've got to reinforce. And, it's pretty expensive. We don't think from an aesthetic standpoint, it's facing Route 8. You're going how many miles per hour as you pass it. They're all aesthetically pleasing in our opinion. So I don't know what your thoughts were on.
Mr. Francis, look over your comments.
Well,
Thoughts?
yeah, so I talked to these guys, I'm on phone, we looked at this, and I'm just curious, where's option D? Because that's the one I recommended.
D, we reordered them, so A is D.
A is D?
And this is the one that you had
That's
said
got the
like
20
best.
feet and the 20 feet.
This was suspended from 16 to 20, the step down was 20,
Okay.
and then this was centered between the gaps. This
So,
also got slightly larger, just to make sure it's past the elevation change, so
Okay.
I pulled this 2 feet that way.
so on my D, I had the first step down is 33 feet tall, 20 feet wide.
Yeah, 33 feet tall, 20 feet long.
Next one's 20 feet wide, 27 feet tall.
That's right.
And then 38 feet 8 inches,
Yeah,
20 feet 4 inches tall.
yes.
And then with the column at the top, with the decorative detail, 22 feet 4 inches and 42 feet long.
Right.
38.8,
Yeah,
42,
yeah.
that's option D. So that's then option D, which is now revised option A, is the one that I recommended out of our conversation.
Yeah, we had unofficially forwarded it on to get didn't want to submit something I wouldn't have buy off.
Yeah, so I do think that with those measurements as shown in option A is really what the best representation of a step down with the most symmetry along that building elevation. And so are you saying A, you're prepared to do A?
We'd prefer to do B.
Well, you're prepared to do A.
I don't really have a choice, do I?
Well, the A is what I know I recommending, I think that's what Pam equally is suggesting as well.
Yes, and we're throwing our B to the board.
And I'm weighing
We
in
get
on
the final vote, right?
And I'm weighing in on your revised option A is the one that I recommend.
I mean, I guess, the stepping to me, I don't get why that's so important to be this. To me, these being all along in the same line as opposed to step, step, step is more rhythmic. I mean, this is the side of the building. And we're coming back here for like the third time. It's kind of an obscure side of the building. I don't think one is more aesthetically appealing than the other. But from a cost standpoint, one is definitely more expensive. And I'm just not sure why this is such a, we're zoning in on this area. You know, we made a lot of changes to the front elevation to piece the boards. This faces Aurora. This is much more major facade. But, you know, again, it's up to you guys.
Yeah, I mean, I actually think on that revised option A, that it makes the primary tower, it just looks, in my opinion, looks cleaner with that option, that step down. It feels, if you don't do that, like the one at the top, it just feels more crammed together, like it spreads it out and it makes it symmetrical on revised option A. Everything sort of lines up with even numbers.
Tony,
Yeah, and I had two questions. One, how much more was this going to cost you if you have to go with A rather than B, which is your preference, roughly? What do you think
Yeah,
that's going to cost you to do all this reinforcing and all that? How much?
If I had to guess, I didn't prepare that
Roughly.
number again. If I had to guess, it'd be in the realm of like $20,000, 16
yeah.
16 to 20.
And B, and all these, we're looking at the rear end of the building facing Route 8 roughly, aren't we, or are we? This
Side.
isn't the front of the building,
No,
the back.
this is the front of the building here.
Yeah, and the step down would,
This is
Well-
behind the shrubs from ODOT.
yeah, behind the fence, and as you say, they go by 50 miles an hour on there. I don't see too much of changing it. I realize we have our architectural person, but it seems hardly any different, particularly from the rear end of the building we're looking at. That's my opinion.
you know, Scott, who couldn't be here tonight, I know I talked to him briefly, and he felt pretty strongly about A. Old D, now A.
I think it's a good crescendo up to that tower element. I think, you know, to me, it actually makes sense. Those pieces are going to be more visible than the rest of it. It just looks like it's a much more part of the building. I understand cost though, trust me, but, yeah, I'm leaning for that.
See, I like the way now A, otherwise known as D, or formerly known as D is. I like that, it looks a lot better. But I just want to state on the record, I appreciate that you guys have made a lot of changes, especially to the facade. I also recognize it's the side of a building, it's a 50-mile-an-hour highway going by with some partial obstruction with trees and shrubbery. I see both sides, but I also feel like, you know, we have to lean on the professionals that have given their opinion on this too, but I don't know.
Pretty much feel the same way.
We don't always agree with them, we don't have to agree with them, but
If I can comment on it, I
I get, there was a comment at the last meeting that if cost is your argument, then there is no argument. And I get that because you guys have to do it based on what looks best, and that I really get it on the facade. And on the side of the building is where I'm saying this is something that if there's any room to move, I would hope that this is where it would be, because 16 to 20 may not seem like a lot to anybody because of all the money we're spending here, but it's been death by 1,000 cuts on this job for the past year and a half. We've done this at the absolute worst time we could. That's our problem, no big deal. But what I'm saying, if we're gonna, if I'm asking for any kind of leeway, it would be on the side of the building where it would be helpful, so.
That's what's going through my mind. Because we don't have to approve it in unanimous, we don't think we get a majority.
I'd like to mention one other thing, Kevin, if you don't mind. You know, I'd like to see this, you know, moving along because they have these high-class tenants in what frankly is an old Kmart building. And, you know, it's trying to make a silk purse out of an old Kmart building. And I think to get it done and get those rather high-class tenants in here would be wonderful. The quicker the better, that I think.
That's what I'm still kind of torn, because then the other thing I think of is people come in front of us all the time and say, but then you allowed it with this one and you didn't allow it with that one, and everybody's using everybody else's examples and they don't understand the context of the discussion and the rationale and all that,
Yeah,
so.
but we're still putting a whole new wall. I mean,
It's all
this is
through
not-
masonry, we're not using thin
Yeah,
brick.
yeah, this is, you know, it really, to me, it comes down to just a matter of aesthetic of opinion. I mean, I'm not an architect, so I look at it differently, whether it was my building or not, you know. So,
Yeah, I would say, is this not aesthetically pleasing? Is this more, but, you know, shouldn't the owner still get to have a say in what their building looks like? And if they're both pleasing and they both meet your code, why wouldn't the owner get to make the decisions?
Yeah. Good point.
They both meet code.
Well, I mean, you know, there's interpretation of the code, and it's within the town center district, which provides the commission a fair amount of latitude as it relates to design. You know, I think I've shared with you, I mean, I appreciate cost all and such, and I think the city has been equally, has been good to work with, and some leniency and things as it relates to the building, and it's been a good solid relationship. I do think that revised option A looks a lot better as it relates to the step down from the tower. Understanding it's $16,000 or so, and I do appreciate that. I'm not saying that as a matter of fact, but I think that the city, let's say it in a little tongue-in-cheek way, has one bite at the apple. This building won't see a facelift for probably a long, long time, if ever. And I feel like, and I don't want this to come off the wrong way, but $16,000 is a small amount in the overall scheme of the project, that I do think paying attention to these fine details at the tower element and how that transitions down, I think is important, but it's entirely up to the commission. You know, if you want to go with option B or stick with revised option A.
I mean, the concern going with B is it is such a dramatic step down, but I keep coming back to it is also the side of the building. What was wrong with the top one again? I'm trying to remember, we've gone through this so many times.
The top one is what we resubmitted and got the comments back on, so
I know we talked
the
about
top one we're also okay with.
Yeah. The top one, they wanted this to be more centered, and they wanted these to be longer. But the step down also relates to the north side. Right.
I mean, it's pretty dramatic here, because it's setting that apart from this. And so by doing it again severe here, which I think this is relatively that height there, it sets it apart. As, you know, rather than reading just this elevation as itself, you have to read it as the corner, and, you know, this form is a form that sits inside, you know what I mean? Like, it's, this, you have to read this and this together, this large piece and that piece together. So it then reads as a form within a form that then steps down to the next.
You guys had, I don't know if it was the last meeting, but you had like a 3-dimensional view, like the corner. Was that in the last meeting's packet?
It was,
In June?
yeah, we didn't,
Did not bring it.
You didn't bring it, yeah, okay.
It was,
we didn't remodel
sideline
it for this one,
studies
did we? No.
To not follow different options, but to make sure the RTUs were screened.
I'm just at the mercy of how slow the PDF is moving on my computer right now. I don't know why this was taking so long.
Oh, here, listen, you talk about these.
Yeah.
Let me see which one. Sorry. I guess,
Is that the only one coming from the corner, or is there one with a different step down?
oh, there wasn't, I don't know, it wasn't necessarily even the.
Yeah, I know it's not exact, I'm just trying to imagine it, I guess.
Mhm. So this is a little different, this is shifted over more. Two steps.
It's your baby, right? You gotta like.
This is from Best Buy. This is from like the Best Buy corner, that's the front, that's the side we're looking at.
Where'd be Best Buy if you put it?
Right out.
It'd be right
out
here,
here
I get you.
somewhere. So this is now looking at like a 2-step, the tower and the steps.
This is when you recreated kind of,
Yeah.
created a picture.
Yeah, this was for the purposes of, I think, us seeing like the.
This is the RT.
It was for the HVAC and stuff, yeah. That's right.
Yeah, we weren't rendering it as a,
Yeah.
as a pretty picture.
Yeah, I never like going against our professionals. Don't take it personally. You won't. I honestly, I'm leaning towards B, partially considering the cost. And I know, I mean, Scott, who's an architect, and our architectural review, and Brian has looked at the heck of a lot more than these, so that I'm probably, you know, very uninformed, but I almost kind of like it a little bit better, and considering the cost. I don't know. I don't know if anybody else.
So my, more for the purpose of the record, if somebody go back and watch or listen to this, but I do like A better, but I don't think B is a massive, I mean, it's a
Notice.
compromise, but yeah, if this was the front of the building or something like that, I'd have problems with it. And I also don't like going against some are certified and professional. I'm the guy on this council that, or commission that doesn't, I'm not an architect, I'm not an engineer, I'm a tax-paying citizen. So sometimes I get to just look at it from the guy who's, lives down the street perspective. And I think that they've made a lot of concessions and made a lot of changes that we've asked for that maybe even the tenants didn't want to do. And I don't think it's a huge compromise to support option B.
And I'd like to get it going. That's what I think is the point.
I guess we don't have
Move
to
along,
have a
yeah.
unanimous vote, do we?
No, we don't,
So,
but.
You want me to make a motion?
If you'd like to.
Well, I'd like to make a motion that we approve what the applicant's suggestion was revise option B. I would move that we approve that as option B. I said that.
I'll second it.
All right, any more discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Is that on what you sent me, or is that different?
What was sent was this original one, so
We can give you a
Have to-
copy of this one.
So,
He's got copies here that you could.
I just don't wanna sign one that's the
Here's,
wrong
this is the
one.
right one. That's the way we'll.
We'll just speed up the project, Denny. I think.
Yeah, I'm hoping we can submit for permit this week because they had
I
a
think
power
that's-
outage at their office, so it's holding us up, but I told them to draw the structural drawings based on B about
My
3 weeks
wife, my
ago.
wife likes your tenants.
Oh,
Was there
Make
anyone
everybody
opposed?
mine as well.
Yeah. If you can get them in there, I mean, it's pretty good to get tenants like that in a
It's
building like
It's a
this.
great one.
Yeah. By the way, you got the black and white for Sephora too, that we approved that. Yeah.
So I think that's, unless we made a motion, there's some other outstanding issue. You guys had?
I think we can submit for permit. Mr. Article, get our drawings in.
Okay.
Whenever you're ready. Do you have power back?
We good?
Oh, you do, okay.
All right, thank you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
Really appreciate the whole process.
You need this?
Oh, Marge is back.
Second item, are you block? Come on up. Evening. Good, how are you? So this one's a little bit involved. We've gotten some history, we've gotten your letters, a letter, we've got some opinions. I don't know if you want to go through anything, or I think a committee of you guys all read the thing in detail. You're allowed, you're free to tell us as much as you'd like to. We did read your thing, but you feel free.
I guess I don't really have much else to say. I'm not much of a talker. I don't.
Okay.
But, I guess I have an issue with, not being told when you purchase a house that these things affected, and again, and then looking at the laws, I think they need updated, and I think that that would probably make everybody's job easier. I understand that that's a money thing and takes time and effort, but it causes a lot of confusion. I mean, I've looked at, I've looked back at other people that have filed for variances or, to build these an accessory building and stuff. I mean, and it's very unclear. And then even making a phone call to the department, you get some of the information, but I think it has to do with the variance commission, I don't know.
Yeah, BZA,
Yeah,
or-
it being separate, you know, like there seems like there should be, I don't know, more, I don't know. I mean, I guess you guys have each your own job, so,
Yeah.
you know, it makes it hard. But, yeah, I don't know. I just, you know, this has been going on for quite a while, so I'm kind of glad we came to an understanding, I think.
I think so. So maybe, might be easiest if Mr. France just kind of explains your opinion that you gave and where you think we can go from here.
Sure, yeah, I'd be glad to do that, and, Mrs. Block and I did speak on the phone, and I gave her some information as it related to my understanding of the issues. We talked through that, and then, I prepared this memo to the commission dated July 5th. I can, Mrs. Block, if you'd like, I can read it word for word, or if you want me to summarize it, it's entirely up to you, but at the end of the day, it benefits or supports your position, which is you want to be able to, on the record, show that you have what qualifies as a large lot under section 116302I of the Planning and Zoning Code. And that section of the code speaks to detached accessory buildings and the ability to have a larger accessory building than what the code permits, but you have to have at least 1 acre of lot area. And the issue as it relates to your property is your deed does describe slightly more than 1 acre, but some of that's in the road right of way. And there was confusion, concern, and not sure if that counted. And so the question came before me from Mr. Rodick in the building department, understanding I know there was interaction previously with the Board of Zoning Appeals and the city's legal counsel. I went through the code to the best of my ability, and I did not find anywhere in the code that exempts right-of-way out of the building or the lot area. So for the purposes of your deed, which describes your property slightly over 1 acre, your property would be described under this current Planning and Zoning Code, section 116302I, as a large lot and entitled to a greater sized accessory building, which is subject to a conditional zoning certificate through this planning commission. So at the end of the day, that's what my memo states, and I think that's what you and I spoke about on the phone, which I think does satisfy your concerns.
It does.
Yeah, so with that said, as we talked about on the phone, should you, and you weren't sure if you, as my understanding based on our conversation, you weren't sure if you were going to proceed with something on your property, but should you do that, you do qualify under this section of the code for a large lot, and you would be able to come to this commission and seek a conditional zoning certificate for a larger outbuilding. With the understanding you do have that, I say, for lack of a better way to say, a makeshift storage area, which is kind of that open-aired, let's call it storage enclosure that you're using. That would either you'd have to eliminate that and build new, or you could seek a variance from the Board of Zoning Appeal for the additional structure. It sounds like you're pretty willing to just eliminate that should you proceed.
Right, we were originally planning on replacing it because it's kind of useless.
Yeah, so for the purpose, Mrs. Block, for the purpose of this meeting and this memorandum that I penned for the commission, unless they say something otherwise, which my suspicion is, they generally, they generally take the advice of the consultants. And,
Usually.
well, I'm not using it as a dig. Sorry, I had to get that.
Up until 10 minutes ago, we usually
Had to get that out there. But no, they generally do rely on the consultants, and in good faith. Listen, that other case, they have a design right to do something different. In this instance, the code's pretty clear. If the planning commission disagreed, they could just put it on record that they disagree, but at the end of the day, they don't administer the code. It's a zoning administrator within the building department that administers the code. So if the administrator agrees with this memo, and Mr. Rodick would be able to maybe shed some light on that if the zoning administrator agrees, provided the zoning administrator agrees with this analysis, then it comes to the commission, and the commission will process the application as a large lot. So it's on record, essentially.
I do have a question. And it's between H and I.
I can't hear you. Could you speak up a
I'm
little?
sorry. In the code, there's H and then there's I. And I see confusion on, and it goes both ways with height. Now, I've seen memos where you said that the height, that it needed a variance, but then I've seen where the zoning commission sent it back saying that's something that's up to planning. So I'm just trying to get it straight. Is that something that needs a variance, or is that something that is, again, brought in front of the planning commission for their decision?
So, Mr. Chairman, I can answer that if you.
Please do.
Yeah. So we recently processed an application where this very issue came up, and the commission's position was the way 116302I reads, provisions for large lots and unique sites, it states larger accessory buildings pursuant to this section. It goes on and describes that. The commission's position, I think will be the position going forward, is larger accessory buildings does not state it's just area, but rather that would include height as well.
Okay.
And so going forward, I think that's how the applications will be perceived based on a recent discussion with the commission on another application.
Okay.
And I agree, some of this language probably does need some, some cleanup, and the city recognizes that. And you're right, it really comes down to cost. This code was written originally, I feel like in 1982. So that's a little, let's say, vintage for a planning and zoning code. And so they would go through a process rather than what I call band-aiding the code, which is basically doing amendments upon amendments. Really, at this point, it just needs to be a complete rewrite of the code, and that is a very costly proposition, six-figure type costs for a consultant to do that. I could do it, and I could keep the costs down, but it's probably not something I'm really interested in doing, because the city of Macedonia is a pretty complex city. Not that I couldn't do it, it's just a time issue. They need some horses thrown at it. It's probably six-figure type adjustments, so.
Kevin, could I ask Brian a couple of questions?
Please do.
Yeah. When you say the right-of-way should have been included or is included, do you mean the center of the road? Is that what we're talking about when you say right-of-way?
Well, right-of-way is the public domain that does comprise or enter onto private property, and it's the public area that the public has right to use for certain purposes. And so that right-of-way stretches from the center of the road, both directions, a certain distance. I don't know what the right-of-way impacting this property is. So my experience in another community I work in, each road has different right-of-ways.
Yeah.
You would measure from the center of the road
Center of the
in
road.
both directions. So let's say it's a 60-foot right-of-way.
Right.
From the center of the road, 30 feet in both directions is the right-of-way, and at the edge of that right-of-way becomes, don't touch it, private property.
Right.
Within that private property is public domain right-of-way, and that's an area that the municipality has a right to use for municipal purposes.
But for this purpose, you expanded what they have based on the right-of-way. And this right-of-way is roughly how many feet extra did that give?
I don't know. What my memo says is the right-of-way, which is the portion of the public domain that goes on to the applicant and any other property in the city of Macedonia, the portion that goes onto their property that's public domain is
Yeah.
not exempted out by definition for a large lot.
Yeah.
So her lot is actually 1.03 acres, I think is what it works out to be. I don't find any reference in this code that says for the purposes of establishing a large lot for 116302I, that includes or doesn't include right-of-way. So to err on the side of caution, my position is it includes it
Sure.
unless it specifically prohibits it, and
Right.
it doesn't.
Now, the second question I have is, why, I couldn't follow from the memos and stuff, why the BZA denied what was their rationale for denying? It says the BZA denied her Why?
Yeah, I think so. Ms. Block went to the Board of Zoning Appeals for a variance, and every variance is standalone. So in other words, it's acted on independently based on the unique character of the property. So I don't know all the facts and information from that matter, but it's the applicant's burden to present that they have a practical difficulty unique to their property. And so the Board of Zoning Appeals must have felt that that practical difficulty test wasn't met, and they denied the application. That's my read of what the brief little bit that I saw of what they did. And regardless, the question wasn't in front of them about right-of-way and
Right.
what constitutes a large lot.
Right.
And going back to 2016, the action of the commission, and I told Ms. Block this, I went back and I redrew it out based on what they did in 2016, looked back at the code, my former memo back of 2016,
Right.
and I do believe the city 100% processed that application properly. But in this instance, as it relates to Ms. Block's request, her property does meet the standard, I believe, for a large lot of 1 acre or larger.
Okay.
I
Well, that
think,
answered my
I think what
question.
makes
Thank
it,
you, Brian.
makes this one possible is because her deed actually describes the property out to the center line of the road.
Right.
Whereas, I know mine does not. Mine describes the property up to the right-of-way line.
Huh.
So, and I think it's, at some point in survey history, things kind of changed. How
Right.
they do this, and you guys correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah.
But I think if her property, the deed described her property just up to the right-of-way line, we'd be at .9 something acres.
I had the same problem in Hudson with my own property. It was 2.5 acres, and they said, oh no. And you had the right of way was the center of the road.
Yeah.
For old deeds,
Yeah.
it was the center of the road.
Now, if Ms. Block came in and said, I'm sorry, my property goes to the center of the road, you can't do anything with it because
No.
it goes to the center of the road,
They have the right of way.
you would not win that argument because there's effectively perceived highway easements that are granted to a municipality for the purposes of roadway work. But that's not the case here. Really, the question is, does she have a 1 acre lot for the purposes of establishing a large lot for the purposes of a larger accessory structure? And I believe the answer is yes, but you'll need a conditional permit from this commission to do that, should you choose to do that.
The one thing I wanted to say with the BZA is, sorry, I lost my train of thought. When I was trying to explain the property split, I thought maybe it was not addressed in the property splitting because it met the standard of being over an acre, and so there was no information. I mean, I didn't hear the whole, the meetings or anything about the property, just from the notes. I thought, well, maybe nobody addressed it because, it was there saying it was an acre on the, on the deed, over an acre, the 1.03, but then the confusion came when I called the building department and they went to the Summit parcel thing, and it had 3 different sizes, so.
Yeah, it does.
I don't.
Yeah, I think that when that occurred in 2016, the issue is this commission, when they look at lot splits combinations, they look at, is it a conforming lot? And in that zoning district that you're in, is 20,000 square feet is a conforming lot. They don't look at, well, maybe down the line, somebody will want a larger accessory building. They also couldn't have perceived the changes that, that ordinance in 2020, that created those changes, and that this commission would never have been, well, this commission being Mr. Westbrook's was the only one on at that time, would never have been able to perceive that. But again, the nice thing is, for your purposes, I think the issue is solved insofar as under 116302, your 1.03 acre lot that contains right-of-way meets the standard for a large lot for the purposes of a larger accessory building, subject to a conditional zoning certificate.
I have a question, it doesn't maybe necessarily pertain to this, I'm thinking about other cases we've had, the right-of-way possibly being included and all that. What about things like nature preserves, things similar to that? Is that also calculated into acreage then, or not?
Yeah, so someone's lot description may section off a conservation easement, but it won't impact the overall area of the property. The area of the property is the area of the property. So
Even-
whether it has a conservation easement on it or not, it's still, that's the size of the property.
Yeah, if I could add, I thought Mr. Franz went way over and above in his research on this. He and I discussed the right-of-way in a lot of detail. Where I've come from in my career, the law department had made the determination that you use a lot area, you
Yeah, not
exempt
the
the right-of-way. But it wasn't explicitly written that way. That was an interpretation that assisted me. Brian, I think, did a great job looking that over and finding that route to allow the blocks to go ahead and move forward with the project.
So you, will, you know, again, we don't have anything besides to say, I don't have a problem with it, and I don't know if anybody else does have a problem, but even then, doesn't mean anything. Are you gonna accept Brian's interpretation and allow it to be a,
Yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense.
okay,
Yes.
so I think, you know, maybe there's some good notes to take out of this when things do eventually get revised. But I hope, you know, it sounds like with Brian's memo, Bob's gonna accept that if you decide you want to do this, then we'll probably see you back here for just, you know, for the, what you call it,
Conditional
conditional
zoning
zoning
certificate.
certificate for the structure.
Oh, so we can't vote on that because you technically applied for that.
Right.
I got it, okay.
And there's probably a few of them, like a
Yeah,
plan or something.
I apologize. This was really more putting it on the record for Ms. Block so she knows where her property stands as it relates to this current ordinance, and that was really the purpose tonight.
Yeah, you'll know, Bob will be okay with it, and we're not gonna stir all that past stuff up if you come back in for the conditional zoning certificate. All right, thank you. Take the time.
Thanks for your time.
And Mrs. Block, the cutoff date for the next meeting, which would be in August, would be the 28th of this month.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Coming up.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
There's no motion for this then?
Right.
Is this for me or is it?
I think that was had to do with the Norris. If you'd like to read it, you're more.
Public record.
Draw on the back, whatever you want to do. I think that's the, nothing else tonight, unless somebody's got anything else. Somebody,
We get accused in the community sometimes of being inflexible and not compromising. I think tonight we demonstrated that when we can and we're able to with it, with what's
Yeah.
presented, that we can compromise.
Helpful. Well, I'd move to adjourn the meeting. Is it too early?
nope.
I'll second that.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.